feeling my environment and self strongly. Yo, what's going on? It's someone that's someone, and welcome back to today's report. Today's report was sent in by Maddox. The drugs used: LSD, cannabis, cocaine, and nicotine, at a dose of 310 micrograms, 2 grams of cannabis, and a few bumps of coke. The route of administration: sublingually, smoked, and snorted. Gender: male. And the setting: at his house, mainly in the garage. Okay, today we got a pretty strong acid trip from Maddox here. He doses 1 tab that is apparently triple dosed. Before he trips, he does some cocaine, and during the trip, he smokes plenty of cannabis to really just stir the pot for him. I'd say this combination led him to be a bit more irritable than normal, as his senses were heightened significantly. Certain sounds set him off. He watches TV later, which ends up being a bit of a roller coaster. He claims feeling anxious throughout, and he also experiences strong ego disillusion. It was planned casually, but turned out to be an overall strong, impactful trip. I'm sure you'll enjoy this one, so without further ado, let's dive right into this. I wanted to buy a full strip of triple dose tabs, which I only planned on using them to microdose. Then my dealer asked if I could buy 2 more, since they were his last ones. I had the money, so I said yes. Later that night, my stepbrother and I did some cocaine, and then he drove me to pick up the acid. We made the transaction and left. Later, my dealer texted me and said to let him know how the trip goes. I was not originally planning the trip, but I had heard it was very high quality stuff. Without giving too much thought, I dropped a tab and put the rest in my fridge. About 30 minutes after dropping, my friend asked if he can come over with another one of my friends. At the time, I was on the couch chilling with my 2 stepbrothers in the garage. I said yes and asked him to bring some weed. They showed up around 15 minutes later, and I had started feeling some mild effects. I bought about 3 grams of weed and immediately began to smoke. I originally planned to conserve it throughout the trip, but the acid lungs were so nice I couldn't help myself. I started taking bong rip after bong rip until there was nothing left. I sat back in my chair, wondering when I was really going to begin tripping. Just as this thought appeared in my mind, it was as if someone controlling my vision decided to crank up the saturation and just completely deep fry everything in my field of view. I sat for a while, doing my best to relax and remain calm. Eventually, the intensity lowered for a bit, and I checked the time, realized I hadn't even begun to peak yet. Now my experience began to shift from visual to intensely mental. My friend got the hiccups, and it was so indescribably unbearable. Every time he had a hiccup, I felt this excruciating pain deep within my soul. I thought he was going to have hiccups for the rest of his life, and I just felt so bad for him. While this was going on, I couldn't speak. It felt like an eternity until his hiccups finally subsided to my relief. It doesn't really sound that terrible probably, but if you have ever heard bad hiccups, you probably understand. It just sounds so painful. Anyway, I stayed on my couch tripping for a while longer until everyone left. I said goodbye to both of my friends, and my stepbrothers went inside. I was now completely alone. Luckily, I'm pretty good at handling fear during my trips, but there is always that anxiety of what just one bad thought can do. I went in this upper loft area in the garage and set up all my trippy tapestries and posters and stuff. I started watching Hulu to avoid negative or scary thoughts. I turned up the volume and set the remote aside. I forget what I watched, but I kept projecting my consciousness into the characters unintentionally. Then came the commercials. This part was traumatizing. A trailer for a horror movie, I don't recall what movie, comes on, and as soon as I realized what was going on, it was too late. Frozen in fear, I watched the entire trailer, continuing to become people on the television. However, now I was a protagonist in a horror movie. After the commercial ended, I thought I was trapped in this horror reality forever. After a few minutes, I realized I was tripping and began to meditate. I listened to a playlist consisting of Bob Marley and Grateful Dead to get back in a positive mindset. I kept reminding myself that I was in no physical danger and simply have to keep making regular mental checks. After some meditation, I had a few realizations that were so profound, I forced myself not to write them down in the fear that if I read them in a normal state of consciousness, reality would cease to exist. I also had the experience of hearing my ego as a separate entity. I could see clearly which thoughts were forming from my soul and which ones were made by my ego. I thought about how one can mentally train themselves to slowly deteriorate their ego's influence on our behavior through meditative strategies. A while later, I got a text from my stepbrother. He asked me to come out to his car. I was excited to hit some nicotine and listen to music, so I said yes. I left my garage and walked down the driveway towards his car. While walking out, I realized I felt a strong urge to turn around. I slowly turned and stared into the dark wooded area off the side of my house. It looked pretty terrifying, and I realized I was being pulled back into the horror movie reality I previously experienced. I relaxed and put up both middle fingers in the direction of the trees. I just saw this as a way of showing myself that I wasn't afraid, and it really did reassure me. I then turned back and went to his car. We listened to music, and I was having crazy closed-eye visuals the entire time. After some time passed, he went back to sleep, and I went back to the garage. I started to feel the come down after a while, and the trip was basically over. The next day I spent piecing together my experience. I still wonder what statement I thought would have the power to obliterate my reality just by me reading it sober.